Good morning, my friends, and welcome to today's discussion and training on thriving beyond codependency. I'm Marshall Burtcher, and I help codependents rediscover their well-being and happiness by healing the trauma bonds so that they can go on to know, love, and live who they are and create happy relationships in their world. So before we get into today's topic, especially about fawning and how it creates codependency, I need to share this out to the community. The community is where you can find shelter, you can find out you're not crazy, you can find support in your journey out of codependency and back into knowing, loving, and living who you are. So I need to share this out to the community now. To find that, you can go to the description above on Facebook, below on YouTube, click the link, or you can Facebook or Google Thriving Beyond Codependency Community. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so that you can get more updates from me, because I put these videos out 3 to 4 times a week. And I love being able to serve you guys and to give you insight into the journey that I've gone through in hopes that it may contribute to your well-being. So today is getting clarity number 2 in our series of understanding where we're coming from, what's going on in our world with codependency. Yesterday we spoke about, or in the previous discussion, we spoke about the 3 causes of codependency, and my specialty is with the narcissistic abuse cause of codependency, where we go through a cycle called seduction, abuse, and discard. Today, in that video, we actually talked about the 4 F's as well, how the brain responds to a danger. And those 4 F's are we fight it, or we flee from it, we freeze, which is like playing dead, or we fawn, which is about pleasing people. Today we're going to talk more about fawning because it is the cause of codependency. Because a lot of times people approach codependency as the problem. I saw this in my own therapy. I see it in other people's therapy approaches. I see it in books. Codependency is the issue. Codependency is not the issue. The codependency is the byproduct. It is the result of something else that's been going on in our world. And specifically, because I come from more of the biological or somatic point of view in healing, I look at the Fawn Response. The Fawn Response was brought to the world's light, or brought into the world, illuminated would probably be the best word to put it, by a man named Pete Walker. He wrote a book called Complex PTSD, and in that he outlines the Fawn Response. Hey, thank you, Juliet. Got to get that all mystical beard going on, right? So the Fawn Response is what the brain does when it encounters a threat that it cannot kill, it cannot flee from, and that freeze only allows a temporary respite from. This is especially common in children who are dealing with violent or even or unemotionally available parents. Because the child's brain knows instinctively it's dependent on the child to survive. And so it goes into a fawn response. Now, fawning is basically us appealing to the other person. So if I'm in a fawn response, I'm attempting to please them. I'm attempting to avoid conflict. I'm attempting to reduce the amount of friction between me and them so that they will at least not hurt me, but at most love or like or approve of me. And we do this in a number of different ways. One of the most prominent ones is we apologize for everything. We apologize for having feelings. We apologize for having wants. We apologize for existing, for taking up space. This is a fawn response in action. The goal behind this, again, is to get their approval. Because if we can find their approval, we can feel safe. And if we can feel safe, maybe we can get a little love. Maybe we can begin to develop who we are, discover who we are, develop our identity. And most of all, maybe we can rest. Because a lot of times when we're in a relationship, and I put that in quotes because it's not a relationship, it's a dictatorship. When we're in interaction with someone that we have to fawn to in order to survive or stay safe in, we're not resting. We're in a hypervigilant state. Because technically we're going through what's called a freeze-fawn loop. So We're fawning towards them. We're hyper vigilant on what they want. We're hyper attuned to what they're feeling. We've learned their patterns. We're attempting to try to show up in a way that pleases them. But then it doesn't always work, right? We tend to get attacked. Sometimes they even attack us for the things that they wanted us to do. And so we go back into a freeze. And the freeze is the goal of playing dead so that we don't get further harmed. This loop is a trap. And the trap is based on a fantasy that the fawn state creates. This fantasy says that if I can be perfect enough, if I can be ideal enough, or if I can be less of myself, have no needs, have no wants, have no feelings, if I can just be invisible, they will stop harming me, and two, maybe they'll love me. So in this space of fawning, the brain creates this and allows, what this does is it creates this trap in the fantasy. Basically, we get stuck believing the fantasy, so we become perpetually fawning to the individual in hopes that they will change. And this is why we stick around in these kinds of relationships. We feel powerless to escape. We feel dependent on them. We feel like we lose ourselves if we leave. We fear for our lives sometimes in this. And technically, this is called the trauma bond. And the trauma bond is this emotional bond we have with someone who harms us. And so we believe that loving them more will stop them from harming us. And it creates a chemical reaction in the body that makes us literally addicted to them. Because what happens in trauma bonds and in this fawning sequence is sometimes we do it right. Like, we succeed. Like, I pleased them. They're happy with me. He's giving me love again. He's showering me with this attention. This gives us what's called a euphoric high. So when we go back to yesterday's training, we talked about the EDD cycle. Euphoria, distress, despair. So we go way up into this euphoria because now we think we've succeeded, that we have unlocked the secret to loving this person and getting them to love us. So we become really high. We're experiencing a massive dose of what's called oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, and there's one other one here. Because there's 5 of them. What it does is it chemically bonds us to them. We're having a high with them. And this euphoria is directly correlated to how much we've been neglected, how much we haven't been loved with them. So the longer the period between being succeeding in making them love or approve of us, the longer the period between those 2 points where I got some love here and I got some love here, that's called deficit or desert. And the longer that period is, determines how intense that euphoria will be. So a lot of times in the sadistic, or the sadistic it is, the seduction, abuse, discard cycle in that relationship, this period becomes longer and longer and longer. Now, I did this deliberately because at the beginning, we're getting a lot of love bombing or seduction right at first. And then it starts to get farther and farther away, and we start to go into distress and despair. And then we succeed, we made them happy, we hit this euphoria. This traps us. We think that we're succeeding. We think that the fawning worked. So we double down on the fawning. We also do something else. We create a habit of what's called undue tolerance. Undue tolerance is where we become hyper tolerant to abuse, to the violations of our body, our mind, our psychology, our well-being, our resources. And we do that because, well, if you're going to fawn, you're not going to rock the boat, right? So if they're doing something harmful to us, generally we're not going to bring that up. We might bring it up once, and then when they abuse us or discard us for it, we're going to learn not to do that. We're going to learn that, hey, I got to get them back to that seduction phase so that I feel safe and I feel lovable. This is what we're really going for. And this is what fawning sets up for us. This is also why we can be very compassionate with ourselves, because we go into fawn states and we don't even know it. Fawning can happen outside an abusive relationship. It can happen in a vulnerable response to someone. I've seen my children do it with people who they have crushes on. I've seen myself do it. I've seen adults do it. We fawn when we feel very vulnerable to the feedback of another human being. So you have to be really mindful of this response in our body. And there's certain signals in your body that tell you you're going into a fawn response. The first one is anxiety. It's a fear of their attention and their approval. And then it's a craving, this impulse of, okay, what can I be that would make them like me or love me? How can I get their approval? I'm going to do this. I'm going to try that. We're moving into fawning. We become what I call externally oriented. We are fixated on their point of view of us rather than being what's called internally oriented, which is having a reference point to how I feel about how they're behaving or how they're treating me. So fawn response is a pretty understandable thing for us, especially if we've grown up in neglect or abusive relationships or family dynamics. The way out of the fawn response is the way out of codependency, and it starts by restoring safety. Now, safety has three specific elements. We need physical safety, we need emotional mental safety, and then we need what's called relational safety. Where I'm going to start out today with this is emotional mental safety. There's a system I built called Be Calm. It's free. What it does is it teaches you how to regulate your nervous system and to help you calm the anxiety and the distress that you experience on a daily basis, especially if you're in this dynamic or if you've exited this dynamic. You can get it. The link is above on Facebook, below on YouTube under resources. Be Calm. It's free. It's got 5 trainings in it. They're going to teach you how to ground in your body properly, how to restore what's called sensation awareness in a safe way. It's going to teach you how to regulate distress and anxiety using somatic touch. So this is one of them. It's called touch regulation. Then we have the heart shelter, and then we have thought observation and flow method and things like this. So there's a number of tools in this system that are going to help you start to restore emotional safety. So that's where we start in getting out of the fawn response, because the antidote to fawn is fight or flight. The antidote to codependency is self-advocacy, and self-advocacy is healthy fight and healthy flight made real. So we started out with restoring safety so that you can access this aspect of your brain, these parts of your personality and your biology, to put them to work for you. So I'm going to look at the comments here. So yes, again, thank you for the beard comment there, Juliet. Susan says, I wrote a poem a few years ago begging my father to love me again and stating that I would do everything he wants. Yes, that's fawning. See, fawning gives the self up. It says, I got to get rid of me in order to be what they want me to be, or what I think they want me to be, so that they'll love me. Because we have a psychological, emotional, physical, relational dependency on them for our survival. Sometimes that's very real. Sometimes, especially for children, that's real. But for adults, a lot of times it's not. We've experienced something called learned helplessness. Learned helplessness and learned powerlessness says, I cannot affect change on my world. And this comes from repeated failures in trying to get somebody else to change their behavior. It comes from repeated efforts and attempts to try to change our world and our experience, and it just doesn't happen. This is especially common with children who have dealt with parents who are narcissistic or who are highly unavailable to feedback from the parent, or from the child rather. They're not emotionally attuned to the child. This is an understandable result, but it also creates another fantasy. It creates the fiction that I can't make change, but we can. And it also creates fantasy I'm dependent on them for me, my identity. Now I get down into the Get Clarity trainings here a little bit. We're going to talk about attachment. We're going to talk about this thing called differentiation and individuation. That's going to help put a piece in place for you to understand that our freedom from codependency is rooted in discovering, being, and living who we are. Because ultimately, we're looking, a lot of times with codependency, we're looking for a surrogate parent that we can use as a reference point to discover who we are so that we can differentiate or individualize ourselves from them. This is a very natural psychological phenomenon that children go through naturally, but in the case of familial abuse and neglect, that process gets halted and it's arrested by the fawn freeze loop. That puts us into codependency. So that's today's training, my friends. I want you to take some time to just give yourself some space, especially if this was activating. If you're feeling a lot of tension in your body, you're feeling like, wow, shit, this makes sense, but whoa, this is a lot. I want you to take some time with it. Breathe into it. Go get the Be Calm tool set. Try those tools out. It's been used by over 700 people. About 90-ish% of them that report back phenomenal results long term in using those tools. So go there, get that. Be kind with yourself, because fawning isn't something that's wrong. It's not a bad thing. It's a thing that kept you alive. But now the journey is to exit the fawn state and re-engage with healthy fight and healthy flight so that you can be who you are, so that you can create happy relationships and create a life that you want to live. Let me look at the comments here, because Crystal said, I am so tired of self-sacrifice to win nothing but sadness and rejection. So I quit the narcissist. Boom. And I am feeling better. Yeah, if you exit a relationship, and if you don't really have a relationship with narcissistic people, that's more of a dictatorship. But if you exit something like a relationship like that and you feel better, that's a positive signal that, one, you made the right choice, the healthy choice for you. But two, that the relationship was taking away from your well-being and happiness. So when I work with people on relationship, there are two fundamental things that all relationship needs to contribute. And that is your well-being first and your happiness second. So if you're in a relationship that isn't contributing to your well-being and happiness, it's time to evaluate why. Now, if you're in an abusive relationship, that relationship is not going to contribute to those things. It's going to take from them and it's going to harm you. So I highly recommend taking some time to consider exiting that relationship and taking care of your well-being first, because no relationship is worth your well-being. Your well-being ought to be priority in your world. Okay, let's see. Paula says, so painful seeing myself in the description of fawning. I hear you. I hear. Even as I was describing it, I'm like, oh, am I fawning? Where have I been fawning? Where do I need to look at? Retrieving myself from other people's approval. So be kind with yourself, Paula. Be gentle with yourself, because this isn't something shameful about you or anybody else. This has kept you alive. This is a point of brilliance in your brain. So, hey, I can stay alive if I do this. That's what deserves praise and appreciation. If you have shame coming up in that, if you go to the description, you go to the bottom to the resources, there's a tools library link there. You can click there and you can use some of my shame clearings to move through that. Shame is one of those sticky emotions that tend to keep us in a fawn loop because we think we're unworthy, so we need to garner and earn love from outside of ourselves. So we undo that little sticky bugger and break ourselves free there. So appreciate you guys commenting. Thank you for being here. Remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. And when you're ready to break free of your codependency, check out the Heal Yourself course. We'll be starting here in February. We're not in the active promotion for it, but I just let you know that that's there. The link is above on Facebook, below on YouTube. We'll be starting February 22nd. I'm going to be guiding you through how to restore your sanity, your safety, and yourself through the power of that training. So appreciate you. Be safe. Our next training video will be tomorrow. Keep an eye out for that and stay safe. See you guys in our next video. Bye-bye. And you're welcome, Crystal. You're very, very welcome. Bye-bye.